Joining me now is Gundeep Ahluwalia. He's the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Labor. Gundeep, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So first tell me, how do external customers interact with the Department of Labor?
So let me talk a little bit about what Department of Labor does. The kind of breadth and how we touch the American people and the employers is sometimes not known to everybody. Of course, we do the unemployment numbers that come out. But we protect people's 401ks. We are inspecting every mine out there, every active mine twice a year. Every cent of unemployment insurance money, it's a state-federal partnership, but it goes through us. Retraining America, $23 billion worth of active grant portfolio. That's what we manage for the entire nation. Every temp worker coming into the country comes through the Department of Labor. We are the first stop. We issue the labor certificate. Then that is vital for them to apply for a temp visa to come into the country. We protect your 401ks, health plans. All of these are intersects with people, the American public, either the employers, or I also focus a lot on the people who are delivering this vital service as well. So they are the front line of that intersect with the American people. We have about 250 applications that are user-facing, citizen-facing, where either folks are using our whistleblower for OSHA, or they're putting in a Vets Medallion, and they're reporting how many veterans they have hired, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, Gundeep, you did mention unemployment, and I want to ask you about the COVID shutdown, because a lot of people lost their jobs very suddenly. There's a big infusion of cash from the CARES Act that went to the Department of Labor. Tell me how you used that funding, and how did you use it for the larger issue of improving customer experience?
So I think unemployment insurance, first of all, I am truly thankful to our state and local partners, and this is a federal-state partnership. So the unemployment insurance is a program that is run by each state and then administered by us at the Department of Labor in our Employment Training Administration. So what we have done is to partner with our state and partners to give them a lot of funding in terms of grants, right? So that is one step that we have taken. Our focus is threefold. One is to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse in the ecosystem. Two, to improve the equity and and third is timeliness of these benefits and what people are getting. On all three fronts, they actually affect customer experience, because at the end of the day, when you're out of a job, you want your benefits, you want them timely, you want the application process to be easy, and we are working with a lot of states. We recently also did a pilot with New Jersey. We're trying to simplify and introduce plain language, right? So that people don't have to go through this mumbo jumbo when they've lost a job, and it's not very hard for them. We are also doing state grants to understand what is the state of equity and timeliness in various states. How do different genders, how do people get affected who are on the other side of the digital divide? Recently, we've announced a pilot with United States Postal Service, where we will be using their network next year in order for people who don't have access to state workforce agencies or have to go in to prove their identity would be able to use these U.S. Postal Service locations to do ID verification.
Well, let's talk specifically. I want to hear about a specific customer experience initiative that you started that was successful.
So I think the one that comes to mind is the partnership with New Jersey. We did a claimant experience pilot with them, where what we did was we used login.gov on one side as a ID verification provider, but then also did a lot of plain language implementation and simplified the number of clicks that you have to go through in order for you to get your benefits, right? I think that has been a huge success, and New Jersey is building now on top of that pilot to actually revolutionize the entire experience. So that has been a great success. I am also very encouraged with the partnerships that we are launching with other states, especially the one that addresses the folks who don't have cell phones and internet access, and using U.S. Postal Service is going to be phenomenal improvement in my mind.
So from your experience, what are the elements that need to go into a customer experience program that will ensure success?
So at the Department of Labor, we've been doing customer experience long before people started calling it customer experience. And I give you the example of our foreign labor certificate, where we used to issue paper labor certificates on currency-like paper. They would all get stapled to an application and go to USCIS next. Well, we have eliminated that paper from the ecosystem. It saves time because we are not relying on snail mail. It comes to you like a United boarding pass, and a copy of it goes to USCIS, and you can go ahead and do that application. So what I'm trying to say is, we've baked it into the cake. We are not treating customer experience as if it's the icing on the cake. It's baked into the cake. It's the success criteria for every project that we undertake at the Department of Labor.
Well, in order to do that, though, you have to make a cultural change.
It is.
And that's difficult. So what are the challenges around that, and how have you addressed it?
So I think, so one of my colleagues always says, culture eats strategy for lunch, and I think that they're so true. I think the key ingredient is, on one side, it has to be user-centric design, and this is often thrown around a little too much, but I truly believe that it's about the people. It's never about the technology. You have to figure out what is the business problem, how do humans get affected by it, and how to apply your digital assets to actually address that problem. But I will tell you, cultural shifts are about building successes, incremental successes. Look at the program office, look at the constituents that you serve, and then incrementally, positively affect their lives. That's what builds confidence, and then the culture starts shifting, because once you've tasted that success, you want more of it.
Speaking of ensuring success, though, you work with industry partners. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? What's their role in making sure that this is successful? So
the industry partners are vital to the success for the government at large, and these specific programs as well. The reason for that is we do not have the skill sets for every problem that comes our way. Right? So every time you address a new problem, for example, if you're doing ID verification, or you are going to provide a service in a remote part of the country where you do not have presence, right? Or there is a new cloud technology or a digital transformation technology out there, emerging tech. These are all skill sets that are required from time to time, but you also need some understanding of the subject matter as well, right? So if it's the unemployment space, or if it's the grant space, you have to bring these technologies, but also have some understanding of the subject area. That's where our industry partners come in.
And that's where we'll end it. Gundeep, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Powering PMA Goals Customer Experience is sponsored by ServiceNow. Learn more at servicenow.com/gov.
Joining me now is Jonathan Album. He's Federal CTO at ServiceNow. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You have experience both having been a CIO in government responsible for customer experience, and now on the industry side providing solutions. So what are you seeing as far as trends go across agencies in implementation?
So, I think that's a great question and a really good way to start, because you have to prioritize this work. Agencies are so big and complicated. They have so many different kinds of customers, and people interact with agencies for a variety of reasons. So where do you start? That's the first thing that I hear about. And once you get started, now the question is, what are the kinds of interactions that are most important for how a customer of your agency understands and views the agency's ability to serve them? And those interactions have a really big impact on how people perceive the agency, how they trust the agency, and there are a number of ways I think people get started. One of them that I think is just so important is to think about how the data and the work flow across the agency. And then people don't typically work with only one program. People come to the agency, they experience many programs. So what's that customer journey across an entirety of an agency, across multiple programs, maybe even multiple agencies in the government, and really design our work and our systems and the experience from the outside in, starting with the person, taking that human-centered design concept and applying it not just to singular programs or one experience somebody has with an agency, but something that crosses multiple layers or multiple agencies or multiple interactions, and having something that can be consistent and that can be easy for somebody to interact with. I think when you think about those as sort of guiding principles, a lot of this becomes easier, and it becomes less complex about where do I begin and how do I focus.
Well, you say, human-centered design, and I wonder what some of those technology solutions are. What do they look like?
Well, I think very often, we fall back on technologies that we know and we feel comfortable with in our agencies. And when those technologies are platform technology, software as a service capabilities, it's a good place to start because there's so much capability that's already designed and developed for these kinds of requirements that the agency can begin at the 50-yard line. You don't have to start from scratch with building. You start at the beginning building something from scratch. You can really take advantage of work that's already been done within one agency or within other agencies. And that software as a service, that cloud capability, really has an accelerator effect on the work. So you can be more focused on that experience and less focused on the underlying technology because that's been taken care of. I think that's a really important place to start. And then, of course, these platforms and systems, they need to be very accessible so government can appear to the public as being very accessible. So whether that means that it's on a mobile device or it's a website or there is a system in a government office that's very easy for the federal employee to use to serve people, it needs to be simple and it needs to be accessible and it needs to be reliable. The last thing someone who comes into an office needs is to be told, well, I can't serve you because the system is down. So technologies have to work and they have to be things that people want to use. And that translates into great experiences. And those great experiences have a real long-term effect on how people view the agency and how they view the government overall.
Well, it's always important to show positive results and to show value. But how do you do that with something like customer experience? That's really very subjective.
Again, that's a really important point because while subjective, people often have the opportunity to say through surveys and other means what their experience was like. And I think if an agency really is focused on improving customer experience, they're going to be willing to survey their customers, and they're going to collect a lot of data that helps them establish a baseline. And I think that baseline is so important because it's from that baseline you can measure success and understand the value that you're bringing. If we do these systems and we do these projects and we can't demonstrate the value to the stakeholders that oversee our agency, the stakeholders that we're interacting with, it's very hard to prove that you're successful. If you can't prove you're successful, it's hard to do more work. We can turn that around and I can show customer service improved, or I can show response times are down, or our scores went up. Well, now I can tell a really great digital transformation story, and that story is going to lead to more opportunities for more projects and better customer experiences as well.
I want to ask you about an op-ed that you wrote recently.
Sure.
You said that the public should be treated as a customer of the whole federal government.
Yes.
Explain that.
So, in the beginning, we were talking about how so often you have to know where to start, is which program or which agency. And the result of that thinking, because we have this agency by agency, program by program mentality, makes the government feel very siloed to someone. But if you look at the customer experience executive order, you look at the life experiences that are in there, you pick one like experiencing poverty. If you're a person who needs support from the government at that time, there's a whole range of programs. Some could be federal programs, some could be federal programs administered by the state, some could be local programs. You're not necessarily focused on which government agency. It's just the government. And that label of government can stick to a lot of in a negative way to a lot of programs and people, unfortunately, because you have one bad experience here and you associate it across a lot of things. So if we're doing that outside in perspective, where you put the person first and you make government all about the people, and you understand their journey and you recognize it's going to cut across the federal government, the state government, and local government, and we had a way to bring that data together on a single platform, or you had a way to bring those workflows across these agencies together, so you had a connective tissue for that person, and they could see how their journey goes from beginning to end, how they get the services they need across a lot of programs and a lot of agencies, and you do it from one place, well, it becomes very simple. But you can't do that if you're thinking about my program and my agency and my customer. That individual person is a customer of a lot of programs and agencies. So if we say they're a customer of the government, the whole government, the federal government, or this more comprehensive view of government, we end up repositioning and reframing this thing about how we serve them and where they get service and what they experience.
And we're out of time. Jonathan, always nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Powering PMA Goals Customer Experience is sponsored by ServiceNow. Learn more at servicenow.com/gov.
Joining me now is Dana Chisnell. She's Acting Executive Director of Customer Experience at DHS, and Jamie Holcomb is the CIO at the Patent and Trademark Office. Welcome to both of you. Dana, I want to start with you. You're the first Customer Experience Officer for DHS. Explain what your role is and what you're trying to accomplish.
So thank you very much, Mimi, for having me today. My role as Acting Executive Director is to start up and build a culture across the Department of Homeland Security that centers the public, that centers humans in the services that we deliver. This is a challenge across the department, as there are 8 operating components, all of which have slightly different missions and operating models, organization charts, but everybody is unified on meeting both the priorities in the executive order that President Biden signed last year, as well as the Secretary's top priorities around delivering excellent customer experience. So a lot of our work is around culture change, but it is also in making available the platforms and the tools and the guidance so every service across the department can meet the public where they are and deliver a great customer experience.
Well, Dana, as you say, within the many components of DHS, every component is different. It has different culture and priorities and challenges. FEMA is very different from the Coast Guard, is different from the Secret Service. So how do you focus your support so that it's most effective?
We treat each of the components in a unique way. My small team, we're 5 or 6 people right now, with some contractor support, work with the components directly. There's a lead who's signed as the point of contact for all of the customer experience work that each of the component does. We work with them directly to identify what their needs are, how they're making progress, what their maturity levels are in terms of CX, what kinds of actions they can take to move their maturity levels up. And then we meet with them every month to check in on how they're doing, what kind of progress they're making, where things might be blocked. We also have a steering committee that meets every month. This is a group of those CX leads who are working together on specific projects and efforts around policies involving CX at the department, including meeting various customers where they cross over among the components and learning about their needs. But in addition to that, incorporating CX into budgets, into policies, into performance work plans, et cetera.
And Jamie, turning to you, the Patent and Trademark Office created a customer experience action plan about a year ago. What changes have you made over the course of that year?
Well, we were designated a high impact service provider, and that allowed us then to put our 2 different efforts, one for patents and one for trademarks, and put them together on the same My USPTO. So what we're doing now is we have an extra effort and focus on ensuring that the experience is not standardized, but meaningful and valuable to whoever and whomever is contacting and being part of the experience through the trademark and patent portals.
Well, every agency and often every organization within an agency has different customers. So can you describe your typical customer and how that affects your approach to customer experience?
It's really crazy. We have 6 identified personas or demographics, things that have a similar characteristic, but each of them acting very differently. As an example, one might be the mechanic in his home garage and how he would relate to my USPTO, given that he saved all his money and he's now retired and he wants to have this great invention be patented so that he can take advantage of it. He's thought about this all his life, and it's a very confusing set of rules and procedures and regulations. And what we're trying to do is show that workflow, which is very complex, and make sure that he has the experience to do that. We'd also like to take the trademark, and for the home baker and a female coming on board and looking at this overwhelming way to approach trademarks and say, I just want to put a cupcake out there. Well, we want to make sure that we include that type of experience within the workflow so that it's not overwhelming.
And Dana, isn't the first step really in designing a customer experience program understanding the needs of the user? So what's the best strategy for doing that?
That is absolutely the best way to approach this. In a department the size of the Department of Homeland Security, with the breadth of services that it provides, you might think that is a complicated question to answer. But human-centered design methods are pretty simple at their essence. One of the ways that we understand the needs of users is we go out into the field. We go where those folks are and where they're experiencing our services. So, for example, travelers are obviously an important kind of customer for the Department of Homeland Security at TSA. So one of the ways we learn about their experience is we go do some deep hanging out at security checkpoints at airports to see from their perspective, from the customer's perspective, what that experience is like, how they're feeling about it, what's working well, what's not working well. We also look at the employee side. So what's happening for them in terms of tools and support to make sure that they're also delivering a great customer experience. So that's thing one. We go out into the field and we observe directly. We might even try out the service for ourselves. That's a clear and obvious thing that we could do with TSA, but not always something that we can do if, say, we're working on a vessel entry system for CBP. But we can go to the port and observe what happens as ships come in and agents handle what's happening there.
And Jamie, I wanted to ask you, because you're the CIO, so you have internal customers as well as the external customers. So how does the customer experience, if you will, of your internal customers affect the external?
Yeah, that's a great point. We provide tools for our internal customers, and those tools include things like searching for prior art on the patent side. And they can be very exacting. I mean, they're lawyers and engineers who really need to find out if there's any prior art that has existed before so that they can either award or reject that patent idea, that novel and unique idea that's not used elsewhere. So the exacting requirements of an engineer and a lawyer are a lot different than the external customers who are just trying to find out how to apply and what steps they need to take. And then you bridge the gap. Then you have the ability to say examiner meet applicant, applicant meet examiner. And then they can both bridge through the digital divide on how best to translate their unique ideas into the ability to award that patent. And I think that's a very special and unique experience that we need to provide.
So here's an issue, though, Jamie, because, when people use a digital portal like USPTO, they don't like to have to do like multi-factor authentication, which is very necessary, right? The security is, of course, the bedrock of these digital systems, but it affects their customer experience. Where's the balance?
Exactly. There needs to be a balance. So on the external side, we've tried to relate the fact when people have problems or they put resistance up against that multi-factor authentication, we say, well, it's just like your banking application. Would you like your money to be stolen? Because that's what you're saying. People can steal your intellectual property. And like, oh, no, no, no. So that's the way to relate on the external side. On the internal side, we love it when the examiners come up. This is terrible. It times out after 30 minutes. I don't understand. Why do I have to re-authenticate? And yet we tell them, well, what happens if your dog hits the keyboard by mistake? Anyway, so it's a different way to relate to different experiences.
Dana, you know, most people agree that customer experience needs to be a part of the culture. What are some steps that agencies can take to do that and really bake in the culture of customer experience?
Well, first, Mimi, that is a really great question. Culture is so important. Culture boils down to what is tolerated, what is encouraged, and what is rewarded. And so when we look at culture change at DHS, we look at where teams are doing a good job already of understanding users' needs, customers' needs, encouraging that more by offering more guidance, more support, more tools, more coaching, more room and time, more staffing, maybe even more funding. And finally, how they're rewarded. Are they recognized for doing this work? Are they recognized for improvements in the experience? And are they recognized on an individual as well as a program and a component basis?
And Jamie, what are your thoughts on why customer experience programs fail when they do?
Well, I think that they fail because people are not getting into the actual shoes of the customer. They're thinking, what can be best for efficiency and effectiveness on their part? As an example, I do believe that the federal government has designed so many web pages that represent the organizational structure rather than the customer perspective. So I'm doing it good for my financial guys. I'm doing it good for my procurement guys. I'm doing it good for the law office. They're not doing it good for the entire experience. So that's where it fails. We don't put ourselves in the shoes of the customer.
Dana, can you give me an example of a customer experience program that worked really well that you were a part of?
Yeah, for sure. There's so many possible options here. For my own personal experience, contributing to plain language and language access is wildly important. So making sure that information on the DHS websites is clear, plain, and actionable. I've had specific experience with this myself on Operation Allies Welcome as the U.S. government brought 85,000 Afghan guests to the United States. And we wanted to make sure that while they were going through immigration processes and beginning to get resettled, that they knew where they were in the process, what was expected of them, and what they needed to do next. This had excellent effects for the outcomes for folks as they eventually moved out into their new hometowns across the U.S.
All right. Well, Dana and Jamie, thank you both so much for being on the program. Nice to talk to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Powering PMA Goals Customer Experience, sponsored by ServiceNow. For more on this topic, go to govmatters.tv/ServiceNow. For the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network, I'm Mimi Geerges.